Welcome to the Christ and Classics podcast, where we discuss the classics in light of the Christ. My name is Devin Wilkins, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Colton Moore. And today we are in Book 7, which means it's Episode 8. Colton, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I particularly enjoyed Books 6, 7, and 8 as a unit, and so I'm eager to talk about Book 7.
Nice. Well, what is Book 8 about? Will you summarize it for us?
Book 7?
Oh, sorry, Book 7.
Oh, no, Book 7. So
keeping you on your toes.
At the beginning of Book 7, we're coming off the heels of Paris and Hector in the city. Hector has just met with his wife, and Paris has just been shirking his responsibilities. And now they enter back into battle. Apollo speeds down from Olympus, and she's bent on raising the Trojans to the ground and proposes, but yet proposes a plan to halt the war. And then she tells Athena that she should spur Hector's nerve and strength to challenge one of the Argives man to man in a duel and bloody combat. And so as the two armies seat themselves, Hector rises up, makes his challenge known, and obviously not obviously, but expectedly, Menelaus takes up the challenge. Menelaus and Hector are about to go hand to hand in combat, but Agamemnon dissuades him from doing so. So they say, well, let's cast some lots. And they cast lots, and the great Ajax is selected. And I like this because, as you'll find out, Ajax is like the guy that Hector is afraid of the most throughout the Iliad. If Hector is a coward at all in the Iliad, it's when Ajax comes around. Ajax is considered the second greatest warrior on the Greek side, next to Achilles. So this is like pay-per-view. This is like pay-per-view wrestling back in the 90s, where you've got like Hulk Hogan and The Big Show about to go to town. This is going to be a great battle. This is worth the $60 to pay to watch on TV.
That is right. This is a lot like WWF. You got like all these characters just, oh, come, anybody, I dare you. Yeah. It is a lot like that.
It was really dramatic too.
Yeah.
So they begin to fight, this Ajax and Hector, but their spears and swords prove no good against each other's skills. Ajax heaves a boulder. Don't know where he gets a boulder from. I mean, boulder's out of nowhere in this book. He heaves this boulder from the field, and he smashes Hector's shield, pinning him down to the ground. And Ajax is about to just take Hector out. But Homer says, quote, Apollo quickly pulled him up, and now they'd have closed with swords, hacked each other if heralds of Zeus and men had not come rushing in. And they come and they stop them, and they say, don't kill yourselves. Rather, stay your weapons, and it's best to sleep tonight in peace. Right. So Hector calls strangely and even beautifully for a truce. And he tells Ajax, who's about to kill him, we'll fight again tomorrow, or until some fatal power decides between our armies, handing victory down to one side or another. And so they end up even trading armor in no man's land. And so that night, Agamemnon honors Ajax among the Argives, while the Trojans have a similar conversation, and and in which they advise Paris to give Helen back to Menelaus. Paris is like, no way. I'll give them all the treasures that I have, but I'm not giving them back the girl. And so they end up sending that message to the Argives. The Argives say, no, but we'll cease fighting for the day, and we'll burn all of our dead. And so both armies, unarmed, meet on the battlefield to gather and burn their dead. And meanwhile, Poseidon whines at the Greeks. This is how the book ends. He's whining that the Greeks have erected their own palisade in a rampart of Troy, which he and Apollo built long ago, and it's likely to fall. And so Zeus is like, hey, brother, just calm down. Be satisfied with the glory that you have. Troy's going to burn, and it doesn't matter if you and Apollo built it or not. Like, it's going down. You've got plenty of glory, so quit whining.
He says something like, hey, we'll knock it down after this is all over. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, which is odd. It just, and that even raises just another question of, why do the gods bother? Why do they care? Like, is Troy akin? Is Troy akin to a little child's sandcastle that he spent all morning building, and then it's just going to be burned or destroyed? Like, do they view it like that? Or are they actually deeply invested in the lives of these men?
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems yes, sometimes it seems no. But
It is odd.
That's a summary of book 7, or what I got at least.
Yeah. So immediately when they suggest, "Hey, Hector, why don't you propose man-to-man duel?" I'm thinking, wait, this has already happened before with Paris.
Yeah.
We're doing this again? And why would they even take you up on this? Because last time you guys broke the deal. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But before, the man-to-man duel was to end the war. If the Achaeans won, then the Trojans would give back Helen and reparations. But in this case, there's no talk of this halting the war. In fact, it seems that Apollo and Athena are just happy to take a breather, have a little man-to-man combat, and then they would continue the fighting again later on. So this duel doesn't seem like it will halt the war. So what's the purpose?
I mean, it actually does, but you would think that the war could be halted in another way. Like, you see in lines 35-ish, 33 to 34, 35, Apollo has a plan, and he's talking to Athena. He says, "Come, listen to me. My plan is so much better. Let us halt the war and the heat of combat now, at least for today. They'll fight again tomorrow until they, the Argives, win their way to the fixed doom of Troy." So Apollo, who's on the Trojan side, understands that his time is short with the Trojans because they're going to die by the hands of the Greeks. And so why does he want to halt the war for now? I'm not so sure, but the plan is this: get two heroes on the opposing sides to fight, and come swooping down just in the nick of time before they kill themselves, and then halt the war. And so I guess the question then could be, why does it have to be two heroes about to fight to the death that brings about a temporary peace, a truce even? Is there any sort of conceptual
Apollo and Athena, so in the Lattimore.
Oh, you're reading Lattimore now? Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
I got to read that translation.
It's a more difficult translation.
I know. Mr. House always makes fun of me for reading the Fagels. Mr.
House, it is more difficult. but I read it. I read it in your honor today. It says that Athena and Apollo, assuming the likeness of birds of vultures, settled aloft the great oak tree of their father, Zeus of the Ajax, taking their ease and watching these men whose ranks dense settled, shuddered into a bristle of spears, a shield of shields and of helmets. So you get the sense here that they're like birds, and not just any birds, but birds of carrion. The birds that eat the dead.
Yeah,
and they're sitting up there watching this play out. So part of it, to me, seems like there's amusement or entertainment value for the gods to stop everything and let's just see the best of each fight it out.
Yeah, and the other part of that is they're carrion birds, which means they eat dead flesh, and so you have this sense of them lusting for the flesh of the other side. So like Athena on the Greek side Apollo acknowledges just a few lines before that, like, Athena, I know that you want to just destroy Troy, quote, to plunder Troy to rubble. It's your only passion, he says. And so that fits nicely with the simile of a carrion bird who's like just eager to eat the dead bodies, eager to kill.
Right.
And how does it play into them ceasing the war? Wow.
Well, yeah, I was wondering if it mainly has to do with, it's not, the war hasn't ceased so much as it's really zeroed in on two individuals. Mm-hmm. Two individuals are going to fight it out, and so it can focus your attention, and it gets really juicy when you can, just focus on one of these two are going to die, and I get to, all my attention is wrapped right here. Let's watch, as opposed to like getting lost in the general war.
Yeah, and the two characters who are chosen for the battle, are Hector, the leading commander of Troy, and then Ajax, the second strongest Greek soldier. And you get a glimpse of Hector's honor here right before Menelaus, I believe, steps in to raise his hand to fight him, where, at least in the Fagles, it's line 101, Hector's reflecting on the man that he's going to kill in this duel. And he says, and someday one will say, one of the men to come, steering his oar-swept ship across the wine-dark sea, quote, there's a mound of that man who died in the old days, one of the brave whom glorious Hector killed. So they will say someday, and my fame, like Achilles, will never die. So Hector sees that when he kills this man in no man's land, if he does, when he does, he'll kill him, and that man will carry Hector's honor to the grave, and they'll speak of that dead man, and even like that dead man will get some sort of honor himself by being killed by Hector. And so Hector's fame will never die. And so, like, just to reiterate from last week, like, eternal life for these Greeks is in the glory and in the retelling of their stories for ages and ages to come after they've passed away. And then Menelaus raises his hand. Agamemnon puts his hand back down, and then they draw. Like put your hand, Menelaus. You're not gonna. You go up against Hector, you're gonna die. And so Ajax is chosen, and then like they fight, and they're about to die, and there's no indication that this fight will halt the war, as we said earlier. And so, what's the purpose of it? And here's my proposition. I propose that the fight happens. It's a part of Athena and Apollo's plan to bring them to fight nearly to death, just to save them at the last second, to bring peace. And that you have this beautiful truce that seems to happen just out of the blue, that wouldn't have happened otherwise if Ajax would have just plunged his spear into Hector while he was on the ground. That didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And it's similar to what happens in Book 6 with Diomedes and Glaucus. Diomedes and Glaucus meet on the battlefield, and they start talking, and they realize that their grandparents have been long lost buddies. And they're like, wow, is that so?
Tell you what, I won't kill you, you don't kill me, and we'll just I'll kill your friends and you kill my friends.
Yeah, it's like, here, I'll give you my armor. Well, here, I'll give you my sword. And just don't kill me. I'll kill your best friend, but don't kill me. Okay, that's a great deal. That sounds great.
Right.
And you don't get that sense with Hector and Ajax until after Ajax is about to kill him, and then the gods interfere yet again, and then they make a truce.
Yeah, Colton, this may be a tangential question, but why would Ajax, if Ajax could kill the main opponent, the main defender of Troy, why not say, I don't care what Zeus's herald says, I'm going to kill Hector. I will get the glory and this war will be over. I mean, To
Well,
me, it
could the war
didn't
be
make
over?
sense.
With Paris and Menelaus fighting earlier in the story,
Yeah,
it's quite obvious why the war would end, because this whole war centers around Menelaus and Paris. It's
right.
Paris' fault and Menelaus' wife. And if they solve their problem, then the two sides have solved. But Hector and Ajax seems to be a matter of strength.
Right.
Hector is the strongest, the greatest on the Trojan side, and Ajax is also the strongest fighter currently, because you got the ironically the ironically epitheted. Can I make it to a verb or a past participle?
Sure.
The ironically epitheted swift runner Achilles. He's not so swift because he's sitting in his boat, sulking and anger and with rage. And so the next in line is Ajax. So you got the two heavy hitting soldiers on both sides coming to battle to show off their strength. And so whose backgrounds don't necessarily tap into the heart of why the war is started. And so I don't think if one or the other would have killed each other, that wouldn't have solved the major problem, because Paris still, as we see in this book, refuses to give Helen back.
Oh, I know. And that just drives me bonkers. That whole, I think we should give her back. And Paris says, no. And then his dad says, well, why don't you tell him what Paris said?
Yeah. And
What?
I mean, this is also kind of tangential and kind of a side rabbit trail, but this is really similar to Paris here is really similar to Agamemnon with Achilles. Am I getting ahead of myself? Is this? Oh, wait, I think I am getting ahead of myself. We'll see something similar happen in a future book with Agamemnon and his unwillingness to give back Achilles' girl.
Oh, right. Yeah. But your point is taken that before, in the previous duel, it was mainly, hey, we could settle this between the two guys who have the real issue, Menelaus and Paris. And however that goes, it's going to be over. But it didn't. It did not happen. And so with these two, it is a demonstration of strength. And certainly that could bring the battle to a quicker halt if you lose your strongest warrior. But it doesn't necessarily do so, because Menelaus and Paris still have their feud. And I do think it's interesting that that Menelaus volunteers to fight against Hector, and Agamemnon says, you don't stand a chance. Meanwhile, Paris didn't stand a chance against Menelaus.
That's right.
So when you start to think about how Paris and Hector compare to one another, oh my goodness, it's like you have Goliath for one brother and just a weakling, a mere child for the other.
Yeah. And right after the heralds of Zeus interfere and halt their fighting, Hector's like, let's break off this duel. We'll fight again tomorrow until, quote, some fatal power decides between our armies, handing victory down to one side or another. So once again, there's this idea of fate working in the background. But then watch what happens next. Hector is still talking. He says to Ajax, come, let us give gifts. Come, let us give each other gifts, unforgettable gifts, so that any man may say, here's the purpose, so that any man may say, Trojan soldier or Argive, whether on either side, here it is. First, they fought with heart-devouring hatred, but then they parted, bound by pacts of friendship. And it's like, I read that and I think, man, that is beautiful. Two of the greatest soldiers, the greatest of the Trojans and the second greatest of the Greeks, fighting with hatred, nearly killing each other. being stopped, and then locking arms, trading armor at the end. And I cannot help but wonder if Homer is communicating to us something about the nature of humanity and warfare on a couple of different levels. The first thing that comes to my mind is a temporary peace within a longer war. You see something beautiful happen with like the 1914 Christmas Eve truce,
Right.
where both sides on meet in no man's land on Christmas Eve, and
Right.
there's this beautiful picture of reconciliation, and then they go back to the trenches and start slaughtering each other again. It happened in book 6 of the Iliad. It's happening now. It'll happen again later. And the repetition makes me think that Homer is intentionally communicating that this idea of peace, reconciliation, which is a beauty amidst hatred. And like that's the heart of the Christian gospel. That
Before you go there, it is interesting that, in the prologue, rage got us seeing the rage of Peleus' son. And we see a lot of rage, not just Achilles raging, but many characters raging. Is
the
this...
gods. Yeah.
How does this play into the prologue, the role of rage in the Trojan War?
I think we see it, one difference with rage in the prologue and the anger and hatred, rage, call it here, is something's been stolen from Achilles, which angers him.
Yeah.
And something's been stolen from Menelaus, and that angers him. The gods rage because they're on both. Some love the Trojans and some love the Greeks. And here, the hatred and the rage, I guess in my mind, it's like a twofold. It could be. Obviously, this is inferential. It's not in the text that tells me this, so I'm making a big inference here. They hate each other because, one, I'm a Trojan and you're an Argive. Argive, you're coming to sack my city? No, you're not. So you better buckle up because I'm fixing to kill you. You're not going to take my city. Right. And secondly, it seems to be a matter of strength and glory. Hector being, once again, the strongest, and Ajax the second strongest. Definitely the strongest on the battlefield right now.
Yeah.
And so there's a power struggle at play. And you see that power struggle with the gods as well, especially with Hera and Zeus and that whole dynamic. And so I think that's going on a bit here. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm tracking. I think, it's fair to say that rage is not a good, even for Homer. Is that?
Good. I think so, but maybe like a necessary means to a greater end. Like, remember, I think it was in episode 2 or 3 where we talked about rage and warfare setting the stage, the dark, bleak stage for something beautiful to come, such as what's going to happen in book 24. Here, it's like rage and hatred set the stage for this surprising reconciliation and friendship among two individuals who are about to kill each other.
But, it's similar to in the Bible, the fall. I'm not going to ever say that the fall was categorically a good. But it is that conflict in the story of, humanity that paves the way for God revealing himself in the incarnation and the crucifixion and the resurrection and exaltation. And those are glorious. But that still doesn't make rage, or not rage, that still doesn't make sin, the original sin, uh, justifiable,
Right. Just because an evil, well, rather, wickedness, evil, and sin being used as a means towards a good, true, and beautiful end does not therefore turn that sin into something good, true, and beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, many evangelicals will use the language of a means of grace, or like you see at the end of Genesis, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And so the question is, for Homer, does he view rage as a kind of good, or as a kind of or as an evil, but just as a means toward a greater end?
I mean, maybe I'm reading into it, but I would have to think he doesn't think of it as a good because of how childish both Agamemnon and Achilles act from the very beginning. And that's the source of the rage. And the whole thing, Agamemnon and Menelaus, I think there's a sense in which Menelaus maybe rages against Paris, and that's justified and a good thing because of Paris's evil. But, I want to say that there's something irrational about the rage of Achilles, the rage of
something
Agamemnon.
Irrational or rational? Something rational or irrational?
Sorry, irrational.
Okay.
And self-focused, that they can't see clearly in their rage, and as a result, Achilles isn't even engaged in this battle. He should be fighting Hector in this man-to-man battle right here, the best of the Trojans versus the best of the Achaeans, but he's not. He's sulking. And so I wonder, I do think you're right that the truces that occur in book 6 and here in book 7, they do go against the grain of rage in the book. And they promise maybe there's something more hopeful in humanity than what the gods merely gather around to be entertained by. But all in all, maybe it is just a hint of the loftiness that is in man. And maybe that in part is also what attracts the gods to watch. Like, man is not merely a rage monster, but he's also capable of lofty heights in making peace and virtue.
Yeah, and that, if that's true, then there's a kind of beauty that we tap into when we observe the gods watching and interacting with and fighting for the men. If they view them as not merely, if they view them merely not as like a sandcastle on the beach with a kid, but as like a living creation of theirs that they delight in all of its complexity with virtue and vice commingled together, then there's a kind of beauty there. And Homer could help us imagine what that's like from God's perspective. We are his creation, but yet we're his children. And the Greeks understood of a divinity being like a father. Zeus is called the father often. And a father loves his children and watches them grow and rebukes them and corrects them when vice grabs a hold of their hearts. But nourishes them and helps them and bolsters and supports them always. And you get glimpses of that, especially when soldiers whose fathers are gods and goddesses are about to die. You don't see it as much here, especially at the very end of book 7. So while the Achaeans and Trojans are feasting overnight, what is Zeus doing in line 551 of Fagles? It says, yes, but all night long, the master strategist Zeus plotted fresh disaster for both opposing armies. His thunder-striking terror and blanching panic swept across the rank. We'll keep reading it. They flung wine from their cups and wet the earth, and no fighter would dare to drink until he'd poured, an offering out to the overwhelming son of Cronus. And then they lay down at last and took the gift of sleep. So it's like the book ends with Zeus, like them feasting and happy that they get a reprieve from the war, perhaps even joyous that their two leading men have reconciled. But in the background, there's disaster looming because their father Zeus is about to come crashing down on both of them, which is not really fatherly like, and it's terrifying. And
I actually wondered about that there at the end, and I know we need to wrap it up here, but Poseidon was just complaining about how he wasn't receiving sacrifices from the Achaeans for what they're building. He wanted to be honored in what they were building there, and Zeus says, "Hey, don't make a big deal about it. We're fame of you shall last as long as dawn light is scattered. After the Achaeans are gone back with their ships to their beloved land of their fathers, we'll break their wall to pieces. Don't worry about sacrifice and these things." But then, after that scene ends, and he shifts back to the Trojans and the Achaeans, they pour out wine on the ground in fear of Zeus. It's like Zeus excuses Poseidon, and then Zeus gets a sacrifice. Am I reading that wrong?
Zeus isn't the best brother,
or the best father, or the best
husband. It's a moment where, as a Christian, you read this and you look at Zeus's behavior, and with Poseidon here, and you say, "That's not gold. I'm not going to plunder that." Like Augustine saying of plundering the Egyptians. There's some dirt there. Let's just push that off to the side, and there's a little bit of gold there. Let's take the gold and push it off. So it's the Trojans and the Greeks at this point in the poem are feeling really good. They're refreshed. They've burned their dead, but Zeus has got something else coming for them.
Yeah.
And there's terror, there's disaster, there's panic. And it's going to come quick. But not before the battle turns. Not before the tides of the battle turn with Book 8.
So, in wrapping it up then, to go back to the main question, why doesn't this duel halt the war entirely? And then on top of that, why does the duel not even come to full completion? It seems that if I'm understanding or the progress we made here right, it is not a duel between the primary offender and offended, it is a duel between the best of the warriors. And that really is to maybe entertain the gods. But then the gods call it all short. I'm not exactly certain that I'm as clear on why they do that, other than, well, maybe you could summarize that piece, Colton. Maybe you have more clarity there.
Why it is, say that one more time.
In the end, why Athena and Apollo halt the duel.
I think that's just to set the stage for the reconciliation to come. Like it gives them a pretext for reconciliation. That these two,
yeah.
like both armies are seated on their bottoms,
Yep.
while they watch these two fighters fight, and they're about to die. The gods intervene and they lock arms and they say, to both sides, guys, let's put fighting aside for now. But the question then is, why did they even want to halt the war in the first place? We didn't get to that, but I on next episode, whenever we talk about Book 8, I'd like to explore some of that reason, because something similar is going to happen. So,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
we can wrap it up there, I guess.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Christ and Classics podcast. If you find it insightful or encouraging, please subscribe and consider sharing with a friend. If you have questions or comments, please email us at christoftheclassics@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
And we'll have that in the description as well. I mean, I'm willing to wager that there's nobody that's more encouraged by this than me. Like just getting on this and just talking with you about books it's really delightful to my soul, whether or not listeners think so. So I'm really thankful to do this with you, man.
At the very least, you and I are encouraged.
That's right.
Anyway, with that, take it away, Micah.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.